I think everybody working in or interested in 3D animation, or even if you're just somebody who likes to dabble in CG and making shit in 3D, everybody knows about Blender by now because it's some really dope software, and best of all, it's free. So if you're a noob, or even if you're not a noob, even if you've been using Blender for a few years, there's always some little hidden things that you maybe didn't know about. So maybe you'll learn something from this video. Anyway, tip number 1 is to set up your startup file with your preferences and needs. There are a lot of memes out there about deleting the default cube and then re-adding it, which is super relatable. But also, if you find yourself always deleting the stuff that comes in the startup file to start with a clean scene, or you always change your layout to a way you prefer, just set up your file so that you cut out those steps when you first open up your file. It might seem like a small thing to do and it saves you like 30 seconds at once, but when you find yourself doing it several times a day or week, every week, it does add up. So anything you can do to streamline your process, you should do, especially if you want to do this professionally. So all you need to do is open up a new file, then set it up the way you like it to be. So delete the default cube if you find yourself doing this every time you open a new file. Delete the light and the camera. Make any other layout adjustments that you like when you're working in Blender. Then go to File, Defaults, Save Startup File. So if I close this and then open a new file, it opens up the way I set it up. And I don't have to keep doing the same thing every time I open a new file, and it's always just the way I like it. Tip 2 is resetting your object's origin. You'll find while you're working that sometimes your object's origin, which is this point that it moves and rotates around, sometimes ends up somewhere else, either by doing something like applying the location transform, or even just from editing the mesh. And now your origin point is not where you'd like it to be. So all you need to do is go to Object, Set Origin. And then you've got a bunch of options here that are pretty self-explanatory. And you can use one of these to just either set your origin to where you want it to be on the geometry, like with this object of origin to geometry, or to set the geometry to the origin. So that moves the geometry to where the origin is. But you can also have a bit more control over that and set the origin to a specific edge or vertex or face. You know, if you wanted to scale or rotate or move or whatever from a very specific point. So you just need to tab into edit mode. Then select the vertex or the edge or face or whatever you want the origin to snap to. Then go to Mesh, then Snap, then Cursor to Selected. Then tab back into Object mode and go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. And now your object will scale and move and rotate on whatever around that point that you set it to. Tip 3 is to be aware of the transform orientation of your objects. You've got this transformation orientation dropdown at the top of the viewport here, where you can change the transformation orientations. There's global, local, normal, gimbal, view, and cursor. This has an effect on the manipulator. You see here the way the arrows are pointing along the axes? Right now, I haven't rotated or moved this object, and the axes of the object match the world axes. So the x-axis of the object, the red arrow, aligns to the x-axis of the grid, and so on. If I keep the transform orientation up here on global, the axes will always follow the global axes, the axes of the scene. So X will always be straight along this X-axis, Y will always be along the Y-axis, and Z will always be along the Z-axis. Even if you rotate and move your object around, the axes of the object won't change to match the changes you've made to the object. They will still follow the global orientations. But if you change this to local, then the axes of the manipulator, the axes of the object, will change along with the changes you make to the object. So if I rotate this box and move it, the axes of the object and the manipulator also change. So if I want to now move this object along its x-axis, it's not going to move along the global x-axis, but along the object's local x-axis. So if you're wondering why the manipulator tool axes are not changing along with the changes you're making to your object, that could be why. And knowing this makes working in your scene, moving your objects around, positioning them and all that stuff a lot easier. Tip 4. Very simple, but very useful. To zoom in on something, select the object in your viewport or in the outliner, and then with your mouse in the viewport, just press the full stop or the period button on the number pad. You can alternatively use Shift B and draw a bounding box around the object in the viewport, and it'll zoom into that area. Tip 5. Apply transforms. Okay, so say you're working happily away and you have an object that you've rotated and now you just want to create an array along the x-axis. You'd think you just add an array modifier and adjust the factor on the x-axis, adjust the count, and it should work, right? But no, my sweet summer child, you didn't apply the transforms for the rotation. Because you rotated the object, you can see here under rotation, there are all these values because you rotated it. So now when you try to apply a modifier, the values for the object are different to the values of the world, the global values. So if I select the object and set my transform orientations to local, the x-axis of my object is now pointing down. So when I add a modifier like the array modifier, it thinks that x is now along this axis in this direction. So you need to reset the object's values, but keep the object data the way it is. And you do that by applying the transforms. So because this is rotated, I'm just going to apply the rotation transforms. So you see now, the array goes along the global x-axis because the object's transforms have been reset back to the default setting. So if something's not working the way it should, like for example, if I have this cube that I've scaled to make a rectangle, and now I want to do something like beveling the edges, but when I go into edit mode and select these edges and press Ctrl B to bevel them, the bevel on these edges is way wider than the bevel on these edges, like it's been stretched, which it has been. It was a cube and I stretched it to make a rectangular box. So I'll undo that with Ctrl Z and I'll apply the transforms for scale, because the scale is what I adjusted. And then I'll do the same thing. And you see then now, the beveling is the same the whole way around. Another time this causes an issue is with UV unwrapping. When you're texturing, if you haven't applied the transforms, your UV unwrapping can also turn out pretty whack, like with things stretching weirdly and stuff. So remember to do that before you try to unwrap your objects. You'll get a warning at the bottom about the object having a non-uniform scale. You see here is without the transforms applied, and then here is with them applied. You can see the weird stretching is fixed. Tip 6. Duplicates and linked duplicates. I'm sure if you've been playing around in Blender for a while now, you know that Shift-D duplicates an object, which is cool, but what can be even cooler is using Alt-D, which creates a linked duplicate. What this means is that the duplicated object is linked to the original object and actually shares its data, which reduces memory usage, and it means that whatever changes you make to one object also happens to the other linked duplicates. This will help speed up your workflow so you're not trying to make the same changes to a bunch of duplicated objects, as well as making it easier on your PC and speeding up render times. Tip 7. Repeat the last action. Sometimes you find yourself having to repeat an action a lot, like here where I'm duplicating all these objects along the x-axis. Literally all you need to do to repeat the same action is Shift-R. You're welcome. Tip 8. The quick favorites menu. I really love this one for speeding up workflows. Are there certain tools that you find yourself using a lot and you wish there was a quicker way to access them rather than going up to the toolbar and menus and finding it? You can just assign it to the quick favorites menu, and you can quickly access that menu by pressing Q. So let's say you find yourself resetting the origin to your geometry really often. You can just go and find the tool over here in Object, Set Origin, Origin to Geometry, and then right click on it and click Add to Quick Favorites. And let's say I want to add the Move tool to the Quick Favorites menu as well. Same thing, just right click and add to Quick Favorites. And then when you press Q, when you're in the viewport, you'll see the tools you added there in the menu, and they're so much more easily accessible. Okay, tip 9, copy modifiers and materials. So this is useful when you have a modifier on an object, and you have a bunch of objects that you want to add the same modifier to. You don't have to go and individually select each object and add the modifier like this. All you need to do is select the objects you want to apply the modifier to, and then select the object that has the modifier applied to it already. Then you go to Object up here in the toolbar, then Link/Transfer Data. You could also use the shortcut Ctrl-L, then copy modifiers, and it applies the modifier to all those other objects. And it's a similar process to do the same thing with materials. So this object has the material on it that I want to now apply to these other objects. I just need to select all the objects without the material, then select the one with the material that I want applied to the others, and press Ctrl-L, then Link Materials. Tip 10 is backface culling. This is useful if you're doing something inside an object and the sides of the object keep getting in the way. You just need to use backface culling. It does what it says. It culls the back faces of the object so you don't see them. There are two places where you can set the backface culling depending on the viewport shading you're in. So if you're in solid mode, you can set it up here in the shading dropdown under options, and this doesn't affect the material. But if you have a material applied to the object and you're in the material preview mode and you're using Eevee, you can go over to the material properties, and under settings, you can check that box for backface culling. And now you can navigate around and see what you're doing a lot easier. So that's it for my 10 tips for Blender noobs, or actually anyone using Blender, because Blender as a software, it's got a lot going on in it, and there's no way you can know every little thing about it. So let me know in the comments if there's any tips that I didn't mention. I mean, there are obviously plenty of tips that I didn't mention. I'm sure I'll do another video on this in the future. But let me know what tips you find super useful that will help other people, because I'm all for improving my workflow too. And obviously I don't know everything about Blender either. So please help a sister out, help your fellow animators and 3D people out, and let me know in the comments what tips you have that you really feel like are the holy grail for Blender users. By the way, if you want to learn more about Blender with a really great course created by experienced industry professionals, which comes along with downloadable documentation too, check out the Blender Basics course from TOANIMATE. Plus, you can get a 10% discount by using the promo code Halloween10 if you sign up between October 25th and November 1st. Follow the link that's in my description to sign up or for more info. Thank you to my patrons for all the support. It is greatly appreciated, and you guys are the cat's pajamas. Tap the like button if you did like the video, subscribe if you want to keep up to date with my other uploads, and thanks for watching. Bye!